Well, this has been sort of a pretty good year. As for movies, though, it's been a pretty good year for movies in general. As usual, yeah, there have been a plenty of handful of. They have been plenty of. There has been some pretty good films for this year, but we also had plenty of, we had plenty of films that I kind of liked but didn't do well on their own. Liked, but they did okay. Not liked, but okay. But that doesn't mean that's going to be the same for this year's worst. Aim for the worst films. Sure, these ones have definitely made me pretty mad, and not only made this year's worse, but make them the worst. But they also made me finding for me to find some new least favorites, especially some that I really hated. Some least favorites. But now that 2022 is officially over, who will be, now that we're approaching 2023, which one of these films will be the highlights of this year, and which ones will I be going into, and which ones are going to get the usual scream in the corner routine. This is Me, and this is the top 5 best and worst films of 2022. Number 5, worst. Rock Dog 2, Rock Around the Park. So everybody's going to be pretty shocked that this movie made the worst list. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a shock that this movie was actually supposed to get a spot on the best list. Well, how did this movie get on the worst list? Well, it was supposed to be a really good movie that was supposed to make the best list, but it had a kind of a heavy auto slave scene, which is tough to say, ruined the movie in general. Sure, the movie was enjoyable for what it is and had some good things to make it enjoyable. It was almost going to get itself the automatic seal of impressment as well. But since the one little scene had to ruin everything, that's why Rock Dog 2 had to fall on the worst list. Sure, it got a better spot last time, but this movie found a spot on the worst list. Luckily, it's only taking the first. This is sure the reason why I put this on the worst list is because there are plenty of other films that are better than this one. Again, still, it wasn't a good film, but maybe if they didn't have that heavy auto screen slave scene, which I still cannot say, if they didn't have that one scene, then this movie would have made the best list. But yeah, this dog had to fall into the bottom. Had to fall to the worst list. But at least it's not like later in the worst list where some of the other worst movies will be. Again, not a good movie. Sure, not a terrible movie, but not a good sequel. Number 4, worst. Lightyear. Alright, so probably a lot of people are going to be this surprised that Lightyear made the worst list. Sure, in my opinion, Pixar had used to have a good streak. Sure, there were a few harmless ones like WALL-E and Incredibles 2, but there were also some really enjoyable ones like Cars 3 and Toy Story 4. However, once Luca rolled around, things started going downhill. I was hoping that 2022 would be a better year for Pixar films, but in this year it's not the case. But it's not going to be the case for this time. And that's where Lightyear finds itself on the worst list. And it's probably the same as Rock Dog 2. It probably has a reason of being on the worst list. It's because they can't stop advertising this movie. It's like Monster High, they keep advertising themselves. which I said before, Monster High actually overstayed its welcome. But it's just sad to see this movie on the worst list. Sure, I think I would say this would be more harmless I think this would be more for the actual Lightyear fans. For me, it's just not my cup of tea because I don't do well with sci-fi. I'm just not a big sci-fi fan. But it may not be on the, but at least this movie's not on the worst list. Number 3, worst. Turning Red and Sonic the Hedgehog movie 2. Alright, before I start talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, I just want to say this is the part where we start getting into the worser films. Like the ones that definitely made the worst list for sure. One of the worser films this year. Sure, I'm not going to explain again about what Turning Red is, how bad Turning Red is, because I accidentally discussed it in the 2021 video, which the number 5 spot was supposed to be for the Loud House movie. So I'm just going to say that why Turning Red's on the worst list is because Mang Lee just wants to remove May's Red Panda by force, and he won't let her do anything fun. And that includes going to a Four Town concert. As for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, why do we need another Sonic? I'm just asking, why do we need another Sonic? Because in 2020, we actually had a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which is kind of fine, but I'm kind of a bit more annoyed that we actually need another movie. I'm actually already way more annoyed we're actually getting a third one. But I'm just saying, it's just I'm not a Sonic fan. And just trying to advertise itself too much, like Lightyear did, it's just not like Lightyear did. It's not the cup of tea of movie for me. Not a Sonic person, but as for this hedgehog, I don't think he's gonna go anywhere but the worst. Like, he's not gonna get anywhere else but a number 3 worst spot. Number 2 worst. Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Okay, so I think I learned a valuable lesson with it. I think this movie learned a lesson. Well, to me, it's to never watch Chihuahua movies. Well, any live action Chihuahua movies. I thought this movie was actually going to be this good because the trailer was promising, and with the Disney Blu-ray DVD previews, you get it looks interesting and exciting. But when it was time for the movie to actually present itself, I didn't see anything enjoyable. And the problems can start coming, this movie can start having problems all over the place. First of all, the story is really it's just really boring. Second, the Chihuahuas don't do anything exciting. I thought there was going to be a bunch of Chihuahuas running around, and they play their song in the background. But no, they didn't do any of that. And the worst problem with this movie has to be the antagonist. The antagonist is just terrible. He's just a mean old dog catcher, and he has a mean dog and his mean dog named Diablo, which is a ripoff to the cowboy from Sponge on the Run. Who would name their dog Diablo? I can't believe what I'm going to say this, but after watching this movie, I just felt really ripped off. Felt like I just was ripped off and disappointed. Mad and disappointed. I thought these Chihuahuas were going to do something interesting, but I guess when I thought the Chihuahuas were going to do something interesting and exciting, all they did was waste an hour and a half of my time. And now the number 1 worst movies of 2022 is Disenchanted and Edward Scissorhands. Okay, so if you're wondering how these movies made the bottom of the list, first of all, for Disenchanted, it did not need a sequel. I mean, come on, Enchanted is already annoying enough But making a sequel and putting it only on Disney Plus, that's just enough to make me annoyed. Enough to make me pretty annoyed. But that doesn't help because the trailer is awful, the story is awful, and the villain is just a mean stepmother who gets too annoying. Who would ask for another one of these? As for Edward Scissorhands, I'm just going to say that I hated it. Well, actually mark that. I hate it. The movie is just terrible. The movie is just terrible. The story is boring, and the voice and boring, and they don't do anything interesting. The worst part is there's one specific character, he's like a bully, and every time he comes on screen, he causes nothing but problems and a bunch of hate. A bunch of problems and problems. This movie is just filled with hate. And after I did wanted to leave and then when this guy came on screen, I just wanted to stop watching the movie entirely. But no, because I decided to stick around. All I can say at this point, I just wish I stopped watching the movie sooner instead of finishing the entire movie. Like with Rugrats Go Wild, I wish I just stopped watching the movie instead of just finishing it all up and then forget about it. I don't know what else more to say, but this is more to say. But that's why Disenchanted and Edward Scissorhands, the worst of 2022. Now that we got the bad one, now that takes care of the bad ones. Now that we got rid of the worst ones, before we go and take a look at the highlights of 2022, let's take a look at the honorable mentions. Now that we got to the honorable mentions, again, now we're in the honorable mentions. These are movies that aren't too good, but they aren't too terrible either. Not too terrible either. These movies may not be on the best or the worst list, but at least they're a lot better than Edward Scissorhands, Red Panda, and a bunch of Chihuahuas. The honorable mentions of 2022 are Lego SpongeBob, Life is Crime remake. Not the best Lego SpongeBob remake, but at least there was some creativity in here. Abominable. Sure it has a weak story, but at least the voice acting, songs, good moments, and the antagonist saved this movie from falling into the worst list. Zombies 3 could have been a great conclusion to the Zombies franchise if it didn't run into too many problems. That does include Zed being a horrible boyfriend once again. Diary of Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules. Not as good as the live action movie, and Frank can get a bit nosy, but at least Greg and Roderick did put some love in this movie instead of doing a repeat of what Edward Scissorhands did. Bob's Burgers, the movie, didn't really feel like a movie. It just felt like an actual episode of the show, but extended to 90 minutes. But at least the Belchers tried to make a decent movie, right? As Early Man. Not one of the best Armin films, but at least it's a better sports movie than Space Jam: A New Legacy. Better sports movie than Space Jam: A New Legacy. Escape from Planet Earth. Sure, it has a weak story, and Leah Factorman can get pretty annoying, but at least the movie still has some good voice acting, some good songs, and some nice moments to keep the nice moments. So it wasn't really a huge waste of my time. The live action Pinocchio. Sure, not the one of the best Disney live action remakes, but it is an improvement from Mulan. And finally, Frankenweenie. Sure, it still has a couple of obnoxious characters, but at least they still had enough enjoyable characters with in some good moments to keep good moments, some action, good moments for during the finale, and the good amount of heartwarming and action moments to keep the movie. So it turned out to be a decent movie. Now this may be a decent movie. Now we're gonna probably ask what would happen if I extended both the best and the worst to include all the movies. Well, since this is a longer list, I would probably keep it down to a top 9 best. It's a lot of movies, so I would probably keep this down to a top 9 best and worst. If that was I'm not going to do that because I wanted to keep these movies where they are. But if I do make the exception, then the ones in the worst would make the one of the exceptions. Then the ones in the worst would be Lego SpongeBob, worst would be Lego SpongeBob, Life is Crime, Abominable, Pinocchio, Abominable, Zombies 3 and Pinocchio, Zombies 3 and Early Man. Well, the ones in the best would include Escape from Planet Earth. Ones in the best list would include Escape from Planet Earth, Frankenweenie, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules, and the other one I mentioned. I'm not sure which one it is. It may be what it is. I'm gonna take a wild guess. And Bob's Burgers as well. Well, the Pinocchio would probably fall in the middle, maybe, and the live-action Pinocchio also being on the best list. I think the Bob's Burgers movie would fall in the middle and then the Bob's Burgers movie would fall in the middle as the honorable mention. Again, they're not on the best list. Sure, they're not on the best list, but they were at least able to be lucky to get out of the worst. They aren't the best movies of this year, but they are still lucky that they got out of the worst list. These go down to, they're not some of the best or the worst, but they're just okay, or decent, just decent movies, some of them just being decent movies, and others just being okay. This goes out to all honorable mentions who just tried their best. On to the best list. 5 best. Blue's Big City Adventure and Teacher's Pet. Constantly, that was it's a little strange how these two movies both made it on the list, the best list. It was kind of a bit of a battle situation of which one would be on the list and which one would not get on the list. Personally, they were still equally good, so we decided to put both on the list. Where they both can have excellent entertainment on their own. And as for Blue's Big City Adventure, it's a lot better than Rock Dog 2. I mean, how they handled the flashing lights were a lot better what they did with Rock Dog 2 on the hand. However, it doesn't help that these two can still cause some flaws. With Blue's Big City Adventure, with Teacher's Pet, having the mom come in and interrupt and having the story slow down a bit. Which is kind of not interesting to see her. Every time she does come on screen, she does do a bit of an annoyance to slow down the story. As for Blue's Big City Adventure, on the other hand, sure, we can get a little worried that Josh is not going to make it to his big performance on time. And I also don't like that the characters interrupt each other and they're like, they don't know what they're saying. And they're like, and I'm like, and it does slow things down a bit. Even with the flaws, both movies did deliver what they can offer, with both having a great story, but both having their biggest strengths, like with Blue's Big City Adventure, not having the stupid greedy man they keep teasing about, and handling those flashing lights, and the music is pretty welcoming and party like to get the music just going to feel going. As for the other movie, on the other hand, As for Teacher's Pet, they do have each character, besides the mom, do deliver some interesting charm, with each character having a different personality. And the songs are also what makes the movie stand out. Pretty enjoyable. They may not be on the top of the best list, but they are still intentionally good movies on their own. Not some of the best, not perfect, not one of the best of the year, but still good movies as well. Number 4, best. Minions: The Rise of Gru. Now after waiting about 2 years, 2 long years just to watch this movie because I had so much excitement to watch this, I think I set the expectations up a little too high. As it was time for the movie to present itself, it wasn't what I was expecting the hype for. But it was still a good movie where the movie can still offer a good story, and the characters are still enjoyable. As for what it can do, it's still enjoyable. What the movie are still enjoyable. As what the movie can, pretty enjoyable. As for the movie can do, it does have some good stuff that make the minions pretty good. Make the minions enjoyable, like the good heart and the humor. Like the minions do serve some good laughs and good humor. As for downside though, as well as an pretty good epic finale. As for what I can say on the downside, there is a downside to this movie. This movie wasn't anything too special like Playmobil or the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run, which in this case, like I keep saying, I had to wait like as long as those two movies, like maybe a little bit longer. Sure, it's not one of the best movies of the list. Sure, it wasn't a best movie or anything too special. Anything too special. Was it as good as Playmobil the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run? Well, no. Was it worth the 2-year wait? Absolutely. Number 3, best. Strange Worlds. Okay, before I talk about this movie, everybody is going to be scratching their heads and wondering, how in the world did this movie make the best list? Sure, to be honest, at first glance, sure, this is not a movie that did well in theaters. But to be honest, at first glance, I thought this was going to be another attempt to make another attempt or another excuse to make another horrible Disney culture movie, a very embarrassing Disney culture movie. But the reason why I did agree to see it is because, well, one, I didn't have anything else because the only reason why I agreed to watch this is because I didn't have anything else to watch until Puss in Boots: The Last Wish comes out. So I agreed to watch it. I mean, hey, watching this couldn't hurt, right? And it turned out it wasn't that terrible. Turns out I was utterly shocked when I went to, after watching this, I'm pretty surprised. It feels like a mixed soup of both. It feels like it's mixed of a soup, like they had little elements. It was a little mixed soup, like it had Miitopia, Wally into the mix. And then it also felt and then it gave a bit of those Encanto vibes because, well, it kind of felt like Encanto because they had like those family moments, and the mom kind of almost looks like Dolores with her hair up. But what gives the movie its biggest, and most of the characters aren't. Well, and it did have a good story, but what makes the movie very good is, well, this will go into spoiler territory, which I don't usually like to discuss, but I guess I'll discuss it anyway, because why not? It's the twist, and I'm not going to explain what the twist is, I'm just saying there's a twist. And I'm not going to say it because it's spoiler territory. You guys are just going to have to go watch the movie for yourselves and figure that out. Because I'm not going into spoiler territory. Sure, there are other movies that did it's not the best movie of the year, but it was still it was not one of there are a couple other movies that did a lot better, but for Strange Worlds, it was still a hidden gem. Number 2, best. DC League of Super Pets. Last time, DC League of Super Pets. Well, this was an actual surprise. This was actually this good. Sure, I don't have too much to say about it, but it did actually do, well, at least did as much as it can to make up for the last embarrassment from last year's embarrassment, Space Jam: A New Legacy, which was total embarrassment because they had the villain who came obnoxiously annoying, but luckily that guy got turned into a basketball card so we can end this train wreck. So we can pull this train wreck to the train station. As for that, Super Pets did deliver a makeup for whatever disaster Space Jam: A New Legacy already ruined. As for that, it still had an enjoyable story and the characters are still interesting, but it's not one of the best movies of this year, but it did make up for what the last movie did. And of course, the number one best movie of 2022, or 2023 in this case, is, well, there's 3 of them. Yeah, there are 3 movies. It was kind of hard. It was kind of a bit of a tough choice just picking only 1 or 2. So I had to pick all 3. And here are the movies that were the best of this year. Best of this year. There was Hannah Montana, which surprisingly, that movie just made me cry. Sure, I was a bit off the fence a bit because Oswald, they had an antagonist and his name was Oswald, but to turn out, he wasn't that annoying. And where Hannah Montana does struck strong is whenever Aunt Miley starts singing one of those beautiful songs in the soundtrack, I start crying. The next one is the Paw Patrol movie, which is admittedly going to keep it nice, short, and sweet. It's a movie that I'm going to keep it nice and short and sweet. Nice, short, and sweet. It's a movie that definitely had a credible story trying to help Chase with Chase is overcoming his fears of the big city. But I also like the soundtrack as well because similar to Hannah Montana, it does have some of the songs that put you in a good mood, and then there are some songs you want to cry. But I was having a fun time with this. And of course, I couldn't get enough of Liberty. Liberty was a fun character. I liked her. And then I couldn't basically, I could not get enough of Kendra. Whenever she came on screen, I basically enjoyed her. I didn't know she was in the movie, but when she just first came on screen, I'm like, oh my gosh. I started liking her. Still find her kind of a likable character, so I couldn't get enough of her after watching this movie. And the final one is the Super Mario movie, which is basically around this time. The movie hasn't released yet, but counting this by the time being, this will count on the list. All I'm gonna say, it was a fantastic movie. Well, from Mario fans, it was exciting and it's as good as the Mario games, and there were just so many toads, I couldn't stand it. And then finally, the final best one will be going to Freezery Deluxe. This game is actually, as I'm recording this, the game is officially out right now. Well, it's not out yet, but it's gonna be out by the time this video is probably finished or something. But all I'm gonna say is they took Freezeria HD and give it an upgrade. They gave us some of the stuff I loved from the previous game, which was Cluck Ready to Go. But I also like all the new customers we got to see in the game. Well, that's it for the top 5 best and worst films of 2022. It was a pretty good year where we had some good moments and some pretty terrible ones. But I'm not sure how 2023 will come out by way of movies. Oh, and one last thing I want to say before I finish the video is Elementals, you better not screw this up this time like you always do.